Hello, you're on the Overhead Story channel. Let's go.
I came back from my fishing trip a day early. The weather turned and the other guys decided to call it quits. I didn't argue. Part of me was looking forward to surprising my wife, maybe catching her off guard in a good way. I pictured walking through the door, her lighting up when she saw me, maybe throwing her arms around me like she used to. Instead, I walked into a house that didn't feel like my own. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Not fish, not the outdoors, my boots and jacket carried that already. But something else. Something that didn't belong. There was a strong scent lingering in the entryway, the kind you notice before you even put your bags down. Musky, sharp, expensive men's cologne. Definitely not mine. At first, I thought maybe I was just smelling things wrong. Maybe it was something I picked up at the lodge or gas station. But as I stepped deeper into the living room, the smell didn't fade, it got stronger. And then I saw it. A jacket, dark navy, maybe black under the lighting, was draped over one of the dining chairs like someone had just taken it off. I stared at it for a moment, then looked around the room. Nothing else seemed out of place. The cushions on the couch were as she always left them, the throw blanket folded neatly on the armrest. But that jacket didn't belong to me, and it definitely didn't belong to her. I walked over slowly, my heartbeat picking up without warning. I reached out and touched the fabric. Still warm. That's when my eyes moved to the kitchen counter. 2 wine glasses. Both half empty. A bottle of red on its side with the cork still wedged halfway in. It wasn't the cheap kind we kept around for guests, it was the good stuff. The one we opened maybe once or twice a year, usually around holidays or anniversaries. I stared at those glasses like they were some kind of riddle. One had a faint imprint of lipstick on the rim. Hers. The other was clean, but the contents were darker, deeper red, and the angle it was sitting at told me someone had been drinking from it recently. And yet, I didn't hear anything. No TV. No footsteps. No voices. I left my bag by the door and stepped further in. The scent of her perfume was faint, like it had been sprayed hours ago. But it lingered. And underneath it, still clinging to the air, was that cologne. Too much of it for it to be a quick visit. I made my way upstairs, slow and quiet like I was trespassing in my own house. The bathroom light was on. The sound of a blow dryer buzzed from inside. I pushed the door open slightly and saw her through the foggy mirror, standing there with a towel around her shoulders, head tilted as she ran the dryer through her damp hair. She flinched when she saw me in the mirror. "Jesus," she said, cutting the dryer off. "You scared me. What are you doing back already?" I stayed in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame. Weather got bad. Everyone bailed, so I figured I'd come home. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. Would have been nice to get a heads up. I could have made something for dinner. I didn't want to spoil the surprise. She pulled the towel off her shoulders and walked past me into the bedroom, pretending like nothing was off. "Well, you certainly surprised me. You have someone over?" I asked casually, following her in. She stopped for a beat, then turned around, brows furrowed. "What? No. Why? There's a jacket downstairs. Not mine. And 2 glasses of wine." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway behind me. "Oh. Yeah, someone from the community project stopped by. Steven, you remember him from the fundraiser? He wanted to go over the new workshop plan." I stared at her. "You gave him our anniversary wine?" She waved a hand like it was nothing. "It's not like we were celebrating anything. It was just 1 glass. We were brainstorming and I didn't think it'd matter." My gut clenched. "It was supposed to be a short meeting," she continued. "I didn't expect you to be home." "He forgot his jacket, obviously." "Obviously," I repeated, trying to keep my tone level. She turned back to the dresser, grabbing her brush. "Mark, don't make this into a thing. You know how involved I've been with the project. I've had people over before. Not when I was gone." She didn't respond to that. She just brushed her hair, slow and deliberate, like this was just a Tuesday night and I was being dramatic. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked. She glanced at me in the mirror again. It wasn't important. My mind was racing. Something about the way she moved, the timing of her shower, the quickness of her excuse. It all felt too convenient, too clean. I knew my wife. Knew when she was tired, happy, stressed. Knew the way she got defensive when she was hiding something. And right now, all the signs were flashing red. I looked down at the floor near the bed. No extra shoes. No signs of another person having been in there. But I wasn't convinced. It was too neat. Too scrubbed. "I'm gonna head downstairs," I said. She nodded, barely acknowledging me. Just kept brushing. I walked back to the kitchen, slower this time, letting the silence wrap around me. The wine glasses were still there. I picked one up and held it under my nose. The smell of the wine mixed with the faint trace of cologne from the rim. That was no brainstorming session. That was int asterisk Macy. Even if it hadn't crossed a physical line, yet the energy of it was all over the place. I opened the coat. No wallet, no phone. Nothing in the pockets. But the scent clinging to it matched the one in the house. This guy hadn't just stepped in for 5 minutes. He'd been here long enough to leave a trace. Maybe long enough to make himself comfortable. Back upstairs, she was already in her pajamas. Composed. Unbothered. "You staying up?" I asked. She shook her head. "I'm beat. Long day of brainstorming?" She turned off the bedside lamp without replying. I stood in the hallway outside the bedroom for a long time after that, listening to her breathing settle into what was supposed to be sleep. I knew I should let it go, at least for the night, but I couldn't shake the image of the wine glasses, the warmth of the jacket, the practiced tone in her voice. Something had happened here, and I wasn't about to let it slide. The thing about suspicion is it doesn't just show up, it collects. It builds, bit by bit, like dust in the corners of a room you stopped noticing a long time ago. Once you finally see it, you realize it's everywhere. After that night, I started to see things I'd missed. Or maybe things I'd chosen not to see. It started with her schedule. Emily had always been busy, but suddenly, she was booked solid. More community planning meetings. More pottery classes. A weekend retreat with her project group that came out of nowhere. And every time, her explanations came quick. Too quick. Like she'd already rehearsed them. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I started noticing the cracks. For one, her phone. She used to leave it face up on the counter or the nightstand. Now it was always on her, like it was glued to her hand. Even when she went to the bathroom. Even when she showered. And the lock screen knew passcode. I noticed the first time I picked it up to hand it to her, and saw the screen flash. Face ID required. She snatched it gently from my hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just something I had to change for security," she said. I nodded. Said nothing. The next time it buzzed late at night, she tilted the screen away from me before checking it. Then smiled softly and said, "Spam email." That spam must have had a pretty great sense of humor, because she giggled before responding with a quick tap. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. But I wasn't stupid. That feeling, that gnawing in my gut, it didn't come from nowhere. Then came the phone calls. She started stepping outside to take them, even in the cold. Said the signal was better outside, which was a lie. I knew for a fact the signal in our kitchen was just fine. I even tested it. One time I followed her out under the guise of taking the trash out. She didn't see me and I stayed out of sight behind the car. Her voice was hushed, breathless. I couldn't catch every word, but I heard her say, "I miss you too," followed by a long pause and a laugh that didn't sound like the kind you give to a friend or coworker. She hung up quickly when she turned and saw me standing by the bin. I played dumb. She smiled again, that same tight smile, and walked inside without saying much. That's when I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Her pottery classes, for example. She said they ran until 9 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But once, I passed the community center around 8:15 while running an errand, and the parking lot was nearly empty. Lights off, doors locked. Her car? Nowhere to be seen. I waited 10 minutes. Still nothing. She came home around 9:30 that night, smelling faintly of wine and would smoke. Said the class ran long and they stayed after to clean up. I asked if she made anything new. She told me she was working on a vase. But when I asked to see a photo, she said she forgot to take one. She always took photos of her pottery. The lies weren't big. Not yet. But they didn't line up. Not when I put them side by side. The wine, the coat, the phone calls, the girls' nights that ended with her coming home looking like she'd spent an hour fixing her makeup in a rearview mirror. Even her behavior around our daughter shifted. Emily had always been dialed in when it came to our little girl. But lately she seemed distant, distracted. She'd space out during conversations, forget bedtime stories, mix up school events. One morning, our daughter asked if Mom was mad at her. That hit me harder than I expected. No, sweetheart, I said. Mom's just tired. But I wasn't sure that was the truth. She wasn't just tired. She was somewhere else. Emotionally unplugged. Like she'd already started detaching from the version of her life that included us. Our Aunt Macy dropped off too. At first, I chalked it up to stress or being busy. But it became more than that. She stopped reaching for me in bed. Our kisses turned into pecks. Our conversations turned into summaries of our schedules. I couldn't remember the last time we truly connected. Really talked. Without her checking her watch or glancing at her phone halfway through. I started to withdraw too. I didn't want to, but it happened. I stopped asking where she was going. I stopped calling to check in. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed, back turned, trying not to overthink every breath she took beside me. But I was drowning in it. One Saturday morning, I checked her car. I don't know why. Maybe I just wanted something tangible. Something I could point to and say, see? I'm not crazy. And there it was, 2 coffee cups in the passenger side holder. One with lipstick, the other not. Both from that local cafe near downtown. The one she used to say was, our place. I waited until dinner to bring it up. Casually, like I was just curious. How was the cafe today? She blinked. What cafe? I smiled. The one you stopped at earlier. Oh, just grabbed a quick coffee. I needed to get out of the house for a bit. I nodded. You went alone? She paused. Yeah. I didn't push further. Just tucked that answer away. Along with all the others. It became like a game of memory. Each new inconsistency added to a deck I was quietly building in my head. The jacket, the wine, the sudden shift in affection, the phone glued to her hand, the late nights, the lipstick on a cup she claimed was hers, but in a shade I'd never seen her wear. It was all part of a larger picture I was just beginning to see. One day I asked her straight out, is there someone else? Her eyes widened. What? No. Why would you ask that? I don't know, I said. Just a feeling. She laughed. A dry, nervous laugh. You're being paranoid. I'm not cheating, Mark. That's not even funny. I didn't say it was. Her face changed then. Hardened. You really think I'd do that? That I'd cheat on you? I shrugged. I think something's different. She turned away. I think you've been spending too much time alone lately. Maybe I had. But being alone wasn't what made me suspicious. It was being observant. Being quiet long enough to hear what wasn't being said. The thing was, I didn't want to catch her. I wanted her to prove me wrong. I wanted to believe that I was just overthinking, that all these signs were just coincidences lining up to mess with my head. But the further I looked, the more obvious it became. Something had shifted in her. And maybe in me too. We'd always had a rhythm. Shared jokes. Late-night conversations. That gentle understanding you get with someone after years together. But that rhythm had been replaced with silence. And routine. And avoidance. Like we were playing roles in a play neither of us wanted to be in anymore. I kept hoping for a moment of honesty. That she'd come to me and say, I messed up. Here's the truth. Or at least, I'm not happy. Let's talk. But she didn't. She just kept showing up with new excuses, new outfits, new versions of the same story. The only thing I hadn't seen yet was proof. Cold, hard proof. But I knew it was coming. And when it did, I'd be ready. There's a moment when suspicion stops being a feeling and becomes a fact. For me, that moment started with a decision I never thought I'd make, installing a camera. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was pattern. Her behavior, her lies, the mounting inconsistencies, they weren't subtle anymore. They were waving at me from across the room. She had a habit of storing things in the shed behind our house. Technically, it was for gardening tools and the occasional paint can, but I hadn't touched the thing in months. She, on the other hand, had started going out there more often than usual. Always after dinner. Sometimes early in the morning. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Until the night I asked her what she was doing out there and she said she'd been organizing the pots. It was the middle of winter. That's when I knew I had to stop playing defense. I found a tiny camera online. the kind marketed for baby monitors and front door security. Battery-powered, weather-resistant, motion-activated. I mounted it just above the shed door, disguised as a busted outdoor lamp fixture I'd never gotten around to replacing. The camera had a wide lens and fed directly into my phone. No one would notice unless they were looking for it. That first night, I didn't expect much. She stayed in, claimed she was exhausted from a long meeting, and went to bed early. The next morning, I checked the footage out of habit. Nothing but the wind and a curious raccoon. The second day? Same. But on the third night, everything changed. It was a Thursday. I got home late from work and found the house dim and unusually quiet. All the lights were off downstairs except for one in the hallway. I figured she was already asleep. That was until I checked the time and realized it was barely past 7:30. I looked around. Her car was still in the driveway. No coat or boots by the door. I called her name. No answer. Then I saw the flicker movement on my phone screen. The camera. I pulled up the feed. And there she was. She walked into frame wearing a heavy coat, hood up. Her gait was different. Purposeful. I watched her unlock the shed and step inside. She was alone. For a moment. Exactly 34 minutes later, another figure appeared on the edge of the frame. A man. Tall, maybe 6 feet, clean-cut from what I could tell, wearing a black jacket, the same one I'd seen draped over our dining room chair the night I came home early. He didn't knock. He didn't hesitate. He walked up to the shed and slipped inside like he'd done it 100 times before. I sat there in my living room, the blue light of the screen glowing on my face, and felt my chest tighten. I was hoping stupidly that he'd be inside for 5 minutes, maybe 10. That he'd drop something off, hand her a file, talk about the community project, and walk out. But they were in there nearly an hour. The shed wasn't big. There was no heater. It was barely insulated. I used to keep extra screws and old drill bits in there. And still, they stayed. When the door finally opened again, the man stepped out first. His hair was slightly mussed and he rolled down his sleeves like someone caught halfway through dressing. Emily followed behind him, smiling, genuine, relaxed, like she didn't have a care in the world. They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. Nothing overly obvious. But it was the ease between them. The way she touched his elbow for a second before he left. The way he glanced back as he crossed the yard and smiled to himself. That was it. No theories. No second-guessing. It wasn't just a gut feeling anymore. It was real. I didn't say anything that night. I lay in bed next to her, pretending to be asleep while she showered. She crawled into bed smelling like lavender shampoo and something faintly unfamiliar, cologne maybe, or just the ghost of someone else's presence. She nestled into her pillow, pulled the blanket to her chin, and sighed softly. I lay there listening to the sound of her breath until it evened out into sleep. In the dark, I replayed the video in my head 100 times. The next morning, I watched the footage again twice. I needed to be sure. I needed to be angry for the right reasons. I saved the clip, backed it up to my cloud drive and then again to an external USB I stashed in my toolbox, just in case. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. I needed the full picture. A week passed. She didn't mention the shed. Didn't bring up the project. Didn't give me any reason to believe something was different, except now I could see everything. Every time she made an excuse, I had a timestamp to cross-reference. She'd say she was working late and I'd pull up the feed and see her walk out back at 8:17 p.m. sharp. He'd arrive around 8:40. They'd stay out there together for 45 minutes. Then she'd come back in, eat a late dinner, and toss her clothes in the washer on delicate cycle before getting into bed. It became routine. She had created a second life within the walls of our own home. A secret carefully folded into the empty spaces of our routine. And I never saw it because I never looked. One night, I saw her leave the shed alone and sit on the back step for almost 20 minutes, staring out at the sky. She hugged her knees to her chest like a teenager. When she came back inside, her eyes looked red. I thought maybe it was guilt. But even then, she didn't stop. If anything, things got sloppier. She stopped making excuses for the wine bottles I'd find half-finished in the trash. She stopped double-checking the locks. She stopped covering her tracks because she thought I wasn't looking. That's the part that burned the most. Not the betrayal, not even the lies, but the confidence she had in my silence. The way she moved through the house like I was a background character in her story. She underestimated me. I wasn't going to confront her in a rage. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or beg for an explanation. I was going to watch. And wait. One night, after she went to bed, I walked out to the shed with a flashlight. It was empty, just like I thought. I opened the door and stepped inside. It smelled like her perfume. And something else, sweat, cologne, a trace of something earthy and human. There was a blanket in the corner, folded neatly, and a crate flipped over to form a makeshift table. A wine glass sat next to a candle unlit but still holding the faint scent of wax and berries. This wasn't just an affair. It was a hideaway. A pocket of life she'd carved out for herself where I didn't exist. I stood there in that cramped space for a long time, not moving. Just breathing. Just taking it in. Trying to understand how we got here. When I finally walked back inside, I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I had trusted her, believed in her, stood beside her for years, and she'd thrown that away for something secret and small and fragile. But now the truth was mine, and I would decide what to do with it. The next move had to be mine. After weeks of watching from the sidelines, documenting, observing, pretending, I realized I couldn't just sit on the truth any longer. Emily had created a secret world, one she thought I'd never notice. But now that I had the keys to that world, camera footage, timelines, inconsistencies, it was time to stop living like a ghost in my own house. I started by sending our daughter to stay with my sister. I didn't want her caught in the middle of whatever storm was about to come through. I told Emily it was because of the water damage in the basement, the old sump pump lie. She barely blinked. Said it was a good idea. The following day, I made a plan. I already had the surveillance footage stored safely, but I needed more than just shadows and gestures on a screen. I needed direct evidence. Messages. Words. Lies spelled out in black and white. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening after she went to bed early, migraine, she said, I walked past the living room and spotted her phone charging on the console table. She'd never leave it behind if she were awake. I froze, listening. Nothing but the distant hum of the heater and her occasional cough from the bedroom. I picked up the phone and took it to the kitchen. Sat down, wiped my sweaty hands on my jeans, and stared at the lock screen. It needed a passcode. She'd changed it weeks ago. I tried a few guesses, her birthday, our anniversary, even our daughter's name. Nothing worked. Then I remembered something, an old code I once saw her use on a luggage lock, 1714. Her lucky numbers. It worked. The phone unlocked. I took a breath, opened her messages, and began scrolling. I expected to see flirtation. Suggestive texts. Maybe even a few photos. What I didn't expect was the volume. Pages and pages of conversations with the same contact listed under a generic name, S, short for Stephen, I assumed. But what shook me most was the casual tone. These weren't frantic, guilty messages. They were normal. Comfortable. As if she wasn't even trying to hide the emotional in * Macy. They joked about their schedules, poked fun at me, my early bedtime, my dad energy, my predictable routines. They discussed weekends. Hotels. Bank accounts. Bank accounts? That's when I slowed down and started reading word for word. Let me know when the transfer clears. I'll set the new one up with my info once I confirm. And later, don't worry, he never checks the second account. I used the old signature file. There was something deeper going on here. This wasn't just about two people sneaking around. They were planning. Coordinating. Managing details that had nothing to do with *X and everything to do with logistics. I backed out of the messages and opened her email. Her inbox was sparse. Too sparse. I checked the trash folder. Bingo. Dozens of deleted emails between her and him. Conversations about moving money, filing forms, even searching for short-term rental properties under a fake last name. And there it was again, Jessica. I didn't know who Jessica was at first. But as I read further, I realized Jessica was his wife. I sat back, stunned. This guy wasn't just cheating with Emily, he was married too. And he wasn't just charming his way into her heart, he was structuring something. A plan. An exit strategy. And from the sound of it, Emily was all in. But what neither of them seemed to know was that Jessica had her own suspicions. One message from Stephen to Emily read, Jess is asking weird questions again. Might need to do damage control soon. Just stall on the joint stuff for now. So I found her. Jessica. It wasn't hard. The guy's last name was attached to a rental agreement I found in Emily's deleted files. One quick search and a couple of social media profiles later, I had her full name, her work email, even the name of the gym where she taught weekend fitness classes. I debated reaching out for days. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to do it right. With tact. With proof. I didn't want to come off as some jealous husband making wild accusations. I drafted an email. I kept it simple. Hi Jessica. I don't mean to intrude, but I believe our lives have been entangled in ways neither of us asked for. I think your husband may be involved with my wife, Emily. I have information I believe you deserve to see. If you're open to it, I'd like to compare notes. Mark. She responded within the hour. We met the next day at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown that felt safe enough, busy enough. She showed up in a gray coat, hair tied back, no makeup. She looked like someone who'd been living with a pit in her stomach for too long. I had a feeling, she said, before I even sat down. But I couldn't prove it. Not until now. I brought the *TS, the camera footage, the message logs. Her face changed as she went through them, shock, then anger, then a kind of dull, sad acceptance. I've seen this before, she muttered. I mean, not exactly this. But versions of it. I've been here before. She told me that this wasn't Stephen's first affair. Not even his second. That over the years she'd found vague traces, receipts, hotel bookings, unexplained absences. But every time he talked her down. Gaslight her into submission. He's charming, she said. That's how he gets in. But he always leaves damage behind. We compared timelines. Texts. Places. She confirmed things I hadn't even realized were happening. Like how, during one of Emily's pottery retreats, Stephen had told Jessica he was off the grid for a solo hike. They'd even synced their lies. This isn't just an affair, Jessica said quietly. This is a con. She showed me her bank statements. Stephen had access to accounts she thought were locked down. He'd funneled money from joint lines into temporary holdings that had suddenly disappeared. Sound familiar? I pulled up my bank app on the spot and checked our accounts. One of them, a line of credit under both our names, had a new sub-account opened last month. And from that, $12,000 had been transferred into a name I didn't recognize. I called the bank that afternoon. After 20 minutes of verifying identity and waiting on hold, I got an answer. Yes, the new account existed. Yes, it was authorized by both parties. But I had never signed anything. I requested the documents. They emailed them over within the hour. When I opened the PDF, my signature was right there at the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. It was a shaky imitation of my name. Close enough for someone who didn't know me to believe it, but wrong. Wrong slant, wrong shape, wrong order of strokes. And the notary? Unavailable. No name listed. Fraud. I forwarded the documents to my lawyer. He called me almost immediately. Mark, this is serious, he said. We're not just talking about adultery here. This could be criminal. I spent the rest of the day compiling everything. Phone *TS. Email threads. Bank documents. Copies of video stills from the shed. Jessica did the same. We created a shared folder, one labeled plainly, evidence. There was power in that word. Evidence meant I wasn't imagining things. Evidence meant I had something real. It meant she couldn't spin her way out of this anymore. That night, Emily came home with takeout. Smiling. Humming to herself. She kissed my cheek as she passed by, said, "Figured you'd be too tired to cook." I looked at her and said, "We need to talk." She blinked. Now? I nodded. She sat across from me, noodles in hand, and I slid a manila folder across the table. "What's this?" "Proof," I said. She hesitated, then opened it. Her face changed. Slowly. She flipped the pages, paused on the *T of her message to Stephen, "Don't worry, I'll handle Mark. He's too passive to notice." She looked up at me, jaw tight. "You went through my stuff?" "No," I said. "I investigated your lies." She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she leaned back and said, "So now what?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the next move was already in motion. And it wasn't hers anymore. That night at the table, after she asked me, "So now what?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted the silence to hang. I wanted her to sit in it. She'd spent so long twisting narratives, brushing off suspicion, turning doubt into guilt. I needed her to feel the weight of exposure. I needed her to understand that I wasn't playing along anymore. Eventually, I said, "Now we deal with what you broke." She didn't speak. Didn't cry. She just closed the folder with a kind of robotic calm and said, "Okay." That one word. It shouldn't have rattled me. But it did. She wasn't remorseful. She wasn't panicked. She was prepared. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. The next day, I took a half day from work and went straight to our bank's main branch. I brought printed copies of the documents I'd received, the unauthorized line of credit, the forged signature, the transfer to the unknown account. I asked for a manager and laid it all out on his desk. "I never signed this," I said. "That's not my handwriting. And I never authorized this sub-account." The manager furrowed his brow and excused himself to consult with someone higher up. 20 minutes later, I was sitting with the bank's fraud department. They were surprisingly calm, too calm for how much was at stake. I asked them point blank, "How does this happen? How does someone open a joint account and transfer money using a forged signature? Their response? It's rare but not impossible, especially when the request comes from an existing account holder. Apparently, Emily had all the right information, account numbers, address verification, even an outdated security phrase I hadn't thought about since we opened our savings account 8 years ago. They assumed it was me because it all came from our shared online profile. She must have answered every verification question with confidence. Why wouldn't they believe her? They launched an internal investigation but warned me that unless I could definitively prove the signature wasn't mine, I could be liable for the balance. That word hit me like a hammer. Liable. Suddenly, I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was the potential co-signer on a pile of debt I never agreed to. If the money disappeared and it looked like it had, I could be responsible for paying it back. I called my lawyer immediately. He arranged for a certified handwriting analyst to examine the documents. She compared the signature to multiple samples of my verified handwriting, tax forms, previous bank drafts, even old birthday cards I'd written to my daughter. 2 days later, she submitted a formal report stating with 95% certainty that the signature on the account paperwork was not mine. I was relieved, but only slightly. Because the moment I submitted that report to the bank, everything shifted from private conflict to legal action. And once the lawyers got involved, the scope of the deception widened. The bank traced the transfers to a shell account under a business name neither of us recognized. The owner of record? Stephen's full name. His ID had been scanned and linked to the account. But when the bank attempted to contact him for verification, they hit a wall. The address on file was A.P.O. Box. The phone number was disconnected. The email bounced back. He was gone. Vanished. I showed the details to Jessica. She paled when she saw the bank records. He used me too, she said softly. I thought I was the only one, but this is bigger. It turns out Stephen had a habit and a method. He'd ingratiate himself into the lives of women in committed relationships, build in *Macy, gain their trust, then slowly manipulate them into handing over access, logins, authorizations, shared accounts. He'd convinced them it was temporary, that it was for their future together, and always used secrecy as a way to deepen the connection. We can't tell anyone yet, he'd say. Not until we're ready. Not until we're free. According to Jessica, she'd caught him doing something similar 5 years ago with another woman in another state. But he'd gaslit his way out of it, told her it was a misunderstanding. She believed him until now. We submitted everything we had to the authorities. My lawyer, Jessica's lawyer, and the bank's legal counsel coordinated efforts. Once fraud was officially reported, a state-level investigation was opened. Emily was served with a subpoena 2 weeks later. She claimed she had no idea about the fraud, that Stephen must have manipulated her too, that she thought everything she'd signed was approved and co-signed already. But her excuses didn't hold up under scrutiny. Emails showed she'd forwarded the forged documents herself. Texts revealed conversations about moving money before it's traced. One thread even included a message where she said, "Just don't use my name on anything else. Mark checks paperwork now." Still, she played the victim. I didn't know what he was doing, she insisted in her official statement. He told me everything was above board, that the account was for a joint investment. I was naive, but no one was buying it. Especially not the investigators who had started linking similar fraud claims from other states. In Colorado, a woman reported that Stephen had used her credit to lease a car and never returned it. In Oregon, another woman claimed she co-signed a business loan under emotional pressure. He had a trail of aliases, shell companies, and dissolved LLCs behind him, all designed to muddy the paper trail. Emily was caught in the middle. But unlike the others, she hadn't just been manipulated, she had actively participated. Maybe at first she was deceived, but at some point she had to have known. She made choices. She signed documents. She forwarded messages. She lied to me, lied to the bank, and worst of all, she brought that man into our lives like he belonged. And then, just like that, he was gone. No one could find him. Not even Jessica, who had once shared a home with him. His apartment was vacated. His car abandoned in a lot outside Vegas. All the bank accounts were emptied. Even his phone numbers were wiped from the grid. It was like chasing a shadow. While law enforcement handled the manhunt, I focused on protecting what was left. I closed our joint accounts, froze my credit, pulled every file from our safe, and made digital backups. My lawyer filed an emergency motion for asset protection, which the court granted based on the risk of financial entanglement. That meant Emily couldn't withdraw from our retirement funds, couldn't sell the house, and couldn't open any new credit under my name. It also meant we were heading toward divorce court faster than I'd imagined. When she realized what I'd done, she came to me crying. "You didn't have to go this far," she said. "We could have handled this together." I laughed genuinely bitterly. "Handled what together? You mean the way you handled everything behind my back?" "I made a mistake," she whispered. "You made 10," I snapped. "And they all have paper trails." In truth, I wasn't angry in the way I expected to be. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to ruin her life. I just didn't want her in mine anymore. She said she'd cooperate with the investigation, that she'd answer any questions and tell the truth. And maybe she did. I wasn't in the room when she gave her deposition. But the outcome was clear: she was complicit. Whether she meant to be or not, she'd helped orchestrate a fraud scheme. And there were consequences. In exchange for full cooperation, she was offered a deal: no prison time, but a suspended sentence, probation, and mandatory financial restitution. She accepted. She cried when she told me. I didn't comfort her. I was done playing the steady hand while she wrote disaster in cursive. The court granted me full custody of our daughter. Emily would get supervised visitation pending the results of her psychological assessment and the outcome of the fraud investigation. She begged me not to take our daughter away. "I'm still her mother," she said. "You had a chance to act like it," I replied. "You picked someone else." As for the money, some was gone for good. But with Jessica's help, we managed to freeze one of the last shell accounts before it emptied. The total recovery was small, maybe 20% of what was stolen, but it was something. Enough to start over. Enough to breathe again. I reopened my workshop the following month. New clients started trickling in. Some of them came through Jessica, who worked in antiques and had connections in the design world. We built a strange kind of bond, two people who'd been burned by the same fire, choosing to rebuild instead of burn back. We didn't talk about Emily and Stephen much. At least, not in depth. But we understood each other in a way few people could. We'd both been conned. But we weren't victims anymore. Stephen was arrested in Nevada 2 months later, caught with fake IDs and a stash of cash in a rented SUV. He was charged with fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy across multiple states. Emily cooperated fully and in return received a suspended sentence and was ordered to repay part of the stolen funds. I was granted full custody of our daughter. Jessica recovered some assets too. She and I began working together professionally at first, her antiques, my custom furniture. But that collaboration quietly turned into something deeper. We didn't rush it. No expectations, just mutual respect and a quiet understanding. We were both rebuilding, not just lives but selves. And somehow, in the aftermath of betrayal, we found something honest. A year passed. Our daughter was thriving. The house was calmer, lighter. Emily saw her once a week, supervised, distant. Jessica moved nearby. We still took things slow, careful with the cracks life had left behind. The man who said he'd won the day I caught them was wrong. I wasn't fighting for them anymore. I was building something better with people who chose to stay.